Have you ever stood on an ancient Irish hillside with the wind whipping around your ears and wondered what secrets the land beneath your feet still holds? Have you ever felt that shiver down your spine, a sense of something ancient and powerful just beyond your sight? We often think of Ireland's past in terms of monuments and manuscripts, of stone circles and saints. But what about the life that pulsed between these landmarks? What about the moments of pure, unbridled celebration, of community and magic that have faded into the mists of time, almost forgotten but not quite gone? These were the great pagan festivals, the very soul of the old world. These weren't just quaint little gatherings or simple folk traditions scribbled down in a dusty book. They were real, vibrant, and absolutely essential to the people who lived here thousands of years ago. Imagine a time before clocks and calendars on the wall, a time when your entire existence was tied to the turning of the earth and the shifting of the seasons. These festivals were the punctuation marks of the year, immense gatherings that brought entire communities together. They were the glue that held society together, reinforcing bonds, settling disputes, and reminding everyone of their place in the grand cosmic dance of life, death, and rebirth. The festivals were a living, breathing part of the landscape itself. They were not held in grand cathedrals built by human hands, but in sacred groves, on wind-swept hilltops and beside mystical wells. The stage for these dramas was the land of Ireland, the hill of Tara, the great mounds of Newgrange, the paps of Annu in Kerry. These places were chosen because they were believed to be powerful, where the boundary between our world and the other world was thin. The air itself would have crackled with energy, with anticipation, as people walked for days to reach these hallowed grounds, ready to take part in something far older and bigger than themselves. Think of it, the moon hanging low and full in a jet-black sky, the only light, coming from a massive roaring bonfire that sends sparks dancing up towards the stars. The air is thick with the smell of wood smoke roasting meat and the damp earth. You can hear the rhythmic beat of a bowrhorn, the haunting melody of a pipe, and the murmur of 1,000 voices sharing stories, poems, and prophecies. This wasn't a story, it was reality. It was the lived experience of our ancestors, a world brimming with a raw, untamed spirituality that connected them deeply to the cosmos, and it's a world we can still, if we listen carefully, hear whispering to us today. It's easy for us, in our modern, brightly lit world, to dismiss these festivals as mere myths or folklore. We read the names Samhain, Beltane, Imbolc, Lugnasad, and they sound like something from a fantasy novel. But that's a profound misunderstanding of what they represented. These were not legends. They were the very framework of life. For the ancient Irish, the spiritual world and the physical world were not separate entities. They were woven together, inseparable. The gods, the spirits of the land, and the souls of the ancestors were as real as the rain on your face or the mud on your boots. The festivals were the moments when this connection became tangible, when people could actively participate in the great cycles of nature. These grand celebrations were the engine of ancient Irish culture. They were the times when laws were recited, when kings were affirmed, when matches were made, and when goods were traded. They were the ancient equivalent of our national holidays, our parliaments, and our biggest sporting events, all rolled into one. Young warriors would prove their mettle in athletic contests, poets would compete to tell the most moving tales, and chieftains would gather to forge alliances or settle old scores. It was here that a person's identity as part of a tuath, a tribe, was solidified. To miss a festival was to be cut off from the very lifeblood of your community and your culture. The festivals marked the 4 great turning points of the pastoral year, the cross-quarter days that sat midway between the solstices and equinoxes. This wasn't an arbitrary choice, it was based on the fundamental realities of life for a farming and herding society. You had the start of the dark half of the year, the first signs of new life, the beginning of the bright summer, and the culmination of the harvest. Each festival was a response to what was happening in the world around them. It was a way of honoring the earth for its gifts, appeasing the powerful forces that governed fertility and famine, and ensuring the survival and prosperity of the tribe for the season to come. Imagine the sheer scale of it all. People from every corner of a territory, from the lowest farmer to the highest king, would converge on a single sacred site. The great fair of Tailtiu, associated with Lugnasad, was said to have been a massive event lasting for weeks. These weren't just solemn religious rites, they were joyous, chaotic, and loud. There was feasting, drinking, music, and romance. It was a time to forget the hardships of daily life and to feel part of something monumental. This was the vibrant, beating heart of ancient Ireland, a culture deeply in tune with the rhythms of the land it called home. The entire civilization was built upon a profound understanding of cycles. They saw it everywhere, in the rising and setting of the sun, the waxing and waning of the moon, the turning of the seasons, and the journey from birth to death and back to rebirth. Their worldview was not linear, like our modern obsession with progress, but circular. The Wheel of the Year, marked by the 4 great fire festivals, was the ultimate expression of this belief. It was a spiritual calendar that guided every aspect of their lives, from when to plant crops and move cattle to when to honor the gods and the ancestors. It provided a sense of order, meaning, and continuity in a world that could often be harsh and unpredictable. This seasonal rhythm shaped their very identity. An individual was not just a person, they were a part of a family, which was part of a clan, which was part of a tribe, all living in harmony with the land and its cycles. The festivals reinforced this collective identity. When you stood around the Beltane fire with your neighbors, you weren't just celebrating the start of summer, you were reaffirming your bond with them, your shared reliance on the sun's warmth and the fertility of the land. It was a powerful social mechanism, creating a deep-seated sense of belonging and mutual responsibility that was crucial for survival. This was a civilization forged not by iron and stone alone, but by the shared experience of watching the seasons turn. The festivals were also deeply connected to their cosmology, their understanding of the universe. The year was divided into 2 halves, the dark half, which began at Samhain, and the light half, which began at Beltane. This wasn't simply good versus evil, it was a necessary balance. The darkness was a time of introspection, of gestation, of the ancestors drawing near. The light was a time of action, of growth, of expansion. The festivals were the gateways between these 2 states, moments of immense power and potential danger when the rules of the ordinary world were suspended. It was a time when the other world, the realm of the gods and spirits, bled into our own. This belief system, this constant awareness of the turning wheel, gave the ancient Irish a unique resilience. They understood that winter always gives way to spring, that darkness is always followed by light, and that death is not an end, but a transition. This worldview permeated their stories, their art, and their laws. The intricate, endless artwork are a perfect visual representation of this philosophy. No beginning and no end, just an eternal, interwoven cycle. The festivals were the moments when people didn't just contemplate this cycle. They lived it, they danced it, they celebrated it, with a passion that shaped their civilization from the ground up. Of all the great festivals, it is Samhain that seems to haunt our modern imagination the most. Pronounced Samhain, it marked the end of the harvest and the beginning of winter, the dark half of the year. This was the most significant of the 4 festivals, the New Year. It was a time of reckoning. All the crops had to be brought in from the fields, and all the livestock had to be brought down from the summer pastures. Decisions had to be made about which animals would be slaughtered to provide food for the coming winter months. It was a time poised between plenty and scarcity, life and death. The air itself would have felt heavy with this transition, but Samhain was much more than just an agricultural deadline. It was above all a festival of the dead. They believed that on the night of Samhain, the veil separating our world from the other world was at its thinnest. The spirits of the ancestors, the great heroes, and even more mischievous or malevolent beings could walk the earth freely. This wasn't necessarily something to be feared. It was a time to honor those who had come before. A place would be set for the dead at the feast table, and doors would be left unlatched to welcome them home. It was a night for divination, for trying to glimpse the future through the coming year's darkness, a practice that made perfect sense on the eve of the new year. Fire played a crucial and symbolic role in the Samhain rituals. All the hearth fires in the homes would be extinguished. Then, on a commanding hill like Tara in County Meath, the Druids would light a great sacred bonfire. This fire was a beacon of light and life in the encroaching darkness, a symbol of purification and a ward against malevolent spirits. Torches lit from this central fire would then be carried back to each household to relight their own hearths. This act symbolically united the entire community, with every home sharing the same sacred flame, a magical protection to see them safely through the dark winter months ahead. This liminal in-between time was also one of great danger and chaos. People would wear costumes and masks, not for fun as we do today, but to disguise themselves from the wandering spirits or perhaps even to embody them. The practice of guising was a way to navigate the supernatural chaos of the night safely. Pranks were played, social norms were turned upside down, and for one night the world was allowed to descend into a state of controlled anarchy. It was a recognition that for order to be restored, chaos must first be given its due. This powerful, eerie, and deeply spiritual festival set the tone for the entire year to come. After the deep, dark slumber of winter that began at Samhain, Imbolc, celebrated around the 1st of February, was the first gentle whisper of returning life. The name itself is thought to mean "in the belly," a reference to the pregnancy of the ewes, one of the very first signs that the earth was beginning to stir from its sleep. It wasn't yet spring, not by a long shot. The days were still short, the air was cold, and snow was still a real possibility, but there was a subtle shift in the energy of the world. The first snowdrops might be pushing through the frozen ground, and the promise of renewal was in the air. Imbolc was a festival of quiet hope and gentle anticipation. This festival was intrinsically linked with the goddess Brigid, one of the most powerful and beloved figures in pagan pantheon. Brigid was a goddess of many things: poetry, healing, smithcraft, fertility, and the hearth fire. She was a protector of the home and of livestock, especially dairy cows. On the eve of Imbolc, families would perform rituals to invite Brigid into their homes to bless them. They would leave out food and drink for her, and a bed would be made by the fire. A ribbon or a piece of cloth would be left on a bush outside in the hope that the goddess would touch it as she passed, imbuing it with healing and protective powers for the year ahead. The most recognizable symbol of this festival is the Brigid's cross. These were, and still are, woven from rushes or straw into a distinctive four-armed shape. These crosses were not a Christian symbol originally, but a powerful pagan emblem of the sun and the turning seasons. They would be hung in the house, particularly over the door and in the byres where the animals were kept. The purpose of the cross was to protect the family and their livestock from harm, from sickness, fire, and evil spirits. It was a tangible piece of magic, a physical manifestation of the goddess's protective power, a tradition that has remarkably survived for thousands of years. Unlike the huge communal gatherings of the other festivals, Imbolc was a more domestic affair, celebrated within the family and the immediate community. It was a time for spring cleaning, for clearing out the old to make way for the new. Wells, which were seen as sacred gateways to the other world and sources of healing, were especially important at Imbolc. People would visit holy wells to leave offerings and to pray for health and fertility. It was a festival of purification, of cleansing the staleness of winter and preparing oneself, one's home, and one's spirit for the bright, active months that lay ahead. It was the first deep breath before the plunge into spring. If Imbolc was a gentle whisper, Beltane on the 1st of May was a triumphant roar. This was the festival that joyously welcomed the beginning of summer, the light half of the year. The name means bright fire, and fire was at the very heart of its spectacular rituals. This was a time of wild abandon, of celebrating life, growth, and, above all, fertility. The earth was now fully awake, bursting with green shoots, vibrant flowers, and the promise of abundance. The sun was gaining strength, the days were growing longer, and the oppressive darkness of winter was finally banished. The energy of Beltane was one of passion, optimism, and unbridled vitality. The central ritual of Beltane was the lighting of 2 enormous bonfires. On Beltane Eve, just as at Samhain, all household fires would be extinguished. The Druids would then kindle the great Beltane fires on a hilltop, often using friction to create a need fire that was considered pure and sacred. The most important part of the celebration involved the community's livestock. The cattle, which had been kept indoors all winter, would be driven between these 2 bonfires. The smoke was believed to purify them, protect them from disease, and ensure their fertility before they were sent out to their summer pastures. This was a vital piece of sympathetic magic. essential for the wealth and survival of the tribe. But it wasn't just the animals that were blessed by the flames. People would also leap over the fires, a brave and exhilarating act intended to bring good fortune, fertility, and protection for the coming year. Young couples would jump the fire together to pledge their troth. This was a festival with a distinct romantic and lustful energy. Trial marriages, known as hand fasting, were often entered into at Beltane, lasting for a year and a day. If the match was a good one, it could be made permanent the following year. It was a time when the normal rules of society were relaxed, and the celebration of life in all its forms was paramount. The celebration also involved decorating homes and byres with fresh greenery and yellow flowers like gorse and primrose, which mimicked the colour of the fire and the sun. This was to honour the vibrancy of the season and to invite the blessings of the nature spirits, the Sidhe, into the home. May bushes would be decorated with ribbons, flowers, and painted eggshells, another symbol of fertility. Beltane was a powerful, visceral, and deeply sensual festival. It was a time to shake off the last of the winter chill and fully embrace the heat, passion, and life-giving power of the approaching summer sun. As the heat of summer reached its peak around the 1st of August, the focus shifted to the first fruits of the harvest. This was Lugnasad, pronounced Lunasar, the festival named in honor of the god Lu. Lugh was a multi-talented deity, a master of all arts and crafts, a warrior, a king, and a god of light and the sun. According to mythology, he established the festival in memory of his foster mother, Tailtiu, who died from exhaustion after clearing the plains of Ireland for agriculture. Lugnasad was therefore a bittersweet occasion, a celebration of the harvest she made possible, but also a commemoration of her sacrifice. It was a time of thanks, but also a recognition that every harvest has its cost. The primary focus of Lugnasad was the cutting of the first corn. This was a deeply symbolic act. The first sheaf would be ceremonially reaped, blessed, and brought back to the village. It would often be made into the first bread of the season, which was then shared amongst the community. This act wasn't just about food, it was about honoring the earth and the gods for their bounty and ensuring that the harvest would continue successfully. People would gather on hilltops and at ancient sites for feasting and celebration. Bilberries, which ripen at this time of year, were a traditional food, and climbing a hill to pick them was a common Lugnasad activity. Beyond the harvest rituals, Lugnasad was famous for the great assemblies, or Einachs, that were held. The most famous was the Einach Tailteann, the Tailteann Games, held at what is now Teltown in County Meath. These were enormous gatherings, part Olympics, part parliament and part market. They featured athletic contests like running, jumping and wrestling, tests of martial skill and horse racing, but there were also competitions for poets, musicians, storytellers and craftsmen. It was a showcase of all the skills and talents that the god Lugh himself embodied. Legal matters were settled, contracts were made, and it was a prime time for young people to court and arrange marriages. This festival represented a moment of peak summer glory, a brief pause to celebrate before the hard work of the main harvest began in earnest. It had a competitive but celebratory atmosphere. It was a time to give thanks for what had been achieved, to show off skills, and to strengthen the bonds of the community through shared games and feasts. Yet underneath the celebrations there was always that subtle undertone of sacrifice, the knowledge that the sun god's power was beginning to wane and the days were starting to shorten. Lugnasad was the glorious golden zenith of the summer, the last great celebration before the slow turn back towards the darkness of Samhain. You might think that these ancient festivals have vanished completely, buried under centuries of change and new beliefs. But if you look closely, you'll see that they never truly went away. They simply changed their clothes. The spirit of Samhain is undeniably present in our modern Halloween. The costumes, the pranks, the bonfires, and the sense of spooky fun are direct descendants of the ancient pagan rituals. When children go from door to door, trick-or-treating, they are echoing the old practice of guising and receiving offerings on a night when spirits roamed the earth. The jack-o'-lantern carved from a turnip in old Ireland is our modern version of a protective light against the darkness. The gentle hope of Imbolc also found a new home. The 1st of February became the feast day of St. Brigid, who conveniently shared a name and many attributes with the ancient goddess. The weaving of brigade's crosses continued uninterrupted, a pagan symbol seamlessly absorbed into Christian tradition and still practiced in schools and homes across Ireland today. The festival's themes of purification and renewal live on in the tradition of spring cleaning. The ancient goddess of the flame and the well became the Christian saint, but her role as a protector of the home and a harbinger of spring remained steadfastly intact. Beltane's fiery spirit proved harder to tame, but its echoes are still there. The 1st of May or May Day has long been associated with celebrating summer's arrival. In some parts of Ireland, the tradition of decorating a May bush with ribbons and flowers has seen a revival. The great Beltane fires may be gone, but the lighting of bonfires on St. John's Eve in late June carries on the tradition of using fire for purification and celebration at the height of summer. The connection with fertility and romance survives in folklore and May Day traditions of gathering flowers and celebrating outdoors, a faint but clear echo of the wild passions of Beltane. Even Lugnasad, perhaps the most forgotten of the four, has left its mark. The tradition of climbing hills in late summer, which was a key part of the festival, was recast as a Christian pilgrimage. The annual pilgrimage to the top of Crove Patrick on the last Sunday in July, known as Reek Sunday, is a perfect example. Thousands climb the mountain, just as their ancestors may have climbed it to honour Lugh and celebrate the harvest. Many country fairs and sporting events that take place in August can be seen as modern, secular versions of the great Éire Tailton, continuing the tradition of games, trade and community gathering at harvest time. The old ways are stubborn, they don't disappear, they just adapt. So, have these festivals been lost, or are they simply sleeping, waiting for us to remember them? The truth is, their spirit is woven into the very fabric of what it means to be Irish. It's in our relationship with the landscape, that deep-seated feeling that certain places are special, that they hold a power and a memory. It's in our love of storytelling, music and gathering together, a cultural instinct honed over thousands of years of festival celebrations. The past is not a foreign country. It's a landscape that we still inhabit, even if we've forgotten the original names of its features. To rediscover these festivals is to see our own traditions in a new and more profound light. The next time you see a bonfire lighting up the night sky on Halloween, think of the sacred fires of Samhain and Tlachtga. The next time you weave a simple cross from rushes, remember the powerful goddess of the flame and the forge. It changes your perspective. It connects you to an unbroken chain of people who have lived on this land, who have watched the same sun rise and set, and who have felt the same pull of the turning seasons. It adds a layer of magic and meaning to the world around us. Perhaps the most surprising fact is that we are living through a quiet revival of these old ways. All across Ireland, and indeed the world, people are feeling a pull to reconnect with this more ancient, earth-based spirituality. Small groups are gathering to celebrate the turning of the wheel of the year, lighting their own Beltane fires, sharing stories at Samhain, and honouring the land in a way that would have been familiar to our ancestors. It's a grassroots movement, a rediscovery of a heritage that is both deeply personal and profoundly communal. The old pulse is getting stronger. So the next time you stand on that windswept Irish hillside, listen. Listen past the sound of the traffic on the distant road, past the noise of the modern world. Listen for the faint echo of a drum, the crackle of a bonfire, the murmur of 1,000 voices joined in celebration. The grandeur and mystery of Ireland's ancient festivals are not lost. They are right here, embedded in the land, in our customs and in our very bones. We just need to learn how to listen again, to feel that ancient rhythm and to see the world not just with our eyes but with our soul.